Do you have a knitter or crocheter in your life and you want to get them something a little bit more meaningful this holiday season? Then this video is for you. Hi everyone, I'm Katrina Walser from Oliphant and I'm a knitting teacher, designer and tech editor based in Sydney, Australia. And this is my 2025 gift guide for knitters and crocheters. So given the way that YouTube works, you're probably a knitter or crocheter yourself. So this video is actually designed for you to send to your loved ones if they ask you what you want for Christmas or the holidays. So this guide's going to be a bit of a mix of both individual products that I suggest you buy and an explanation of what each of those things is and what to look for in those sorts of categories in case you can't get the individual products that I'm suggesting. I have tried my best to find products that are both in Australia and America, mostly because those are the two countries that I've lived and knit a lot in. But if you have products that can be found locally in other countries, that'd be a great thing to leave in the comments as well. So before we really get into it, a few things on nomenclature. If I ever say yarn store, I'm talking specifically about shops that cater to knitters and crocheters. If you're looking for one in your area, then you can search for them on Google Maps. The people in the yarn store will be very excited that you're looking to buy a present for a knitter or a crocheter, and they'll be more than happy to help you with their own suggestions too. Also, I'm probably going to say friend a lot in this video. I really mean parent, sibling, random coworker who you just know likes knitting. And so feel free to buy these things for any of those people. So there are three things that are really essential for knitters and crocheters. That's needles and hooks, depending on which craft they do, patterns, and yarn. Now, in my opinion, you shouldn't buy any of these three things. And I will explain why at this timestamp here. I don't want to front load this video with all the stuff that you shouldn't buy. So to kick off the things that I think you should buy, I think the best present you can buy are what are called stitch markers. So these are things that knitters slide onto their needles and crocheters hook onto their fabric that marks different places in your knitting and crochet. And the reason that I think that they're the best present is that, for one, they're very, very handy, and I don't know anyone who would tell you that they'd be ungrateful to receive more stitch markers. And secondly, they come in a range of different price points. So you can buy very plain utilitarian ones all the way up to super, super fancy ones. And I'll go over a couple of different options for you in each of those price ranges. Before you go shopping for stitch markers, you need to know whether your friend knits or crochets. Now, the way you can tell if you don't know is either ask them or if you've ever seen them crafting. If they have two things, one in each hand, and they're going like this, that's knitting. If they're just holding one thing and they're going like this into their fabric, that's crochet. So the types of stitch markers that both knitters and crocheters can use are called removable stitch markers, and they're the kinds of stitch markers that can open and shut in some way. So if you walk into a store, probably the default stitch markers that you'll see are these plastic ones that look like safety pins. I personally don't love these. Honestly, I find them a little clunky to open and shut. The ones that I like better are called light bulb stitch markers, and they're these little ones that look even more like safety pins. They just don't have the little swirly bit at the bottom. And so these are really nice and flexible. They're easy to open and shut, and they're useful for both knitters and crocheters. The other kind that you can get that are removable are these little spirally plastic ones that I've never used personally, but they look really handy. Now, if your friend is a knitter, then you have a couple more options. You can also buy them stitch markers that are completely shut. So this is going to just look like a random rubber piece because it is, but this is a stitch marker. And so anything where it's a closed loop that you can't open, that's only for knitters. So just keep that in mind if you go shopping. So if your friend is more utilitarian or you're looking for a bit more of a budget option, it's really, really easy to buy stitch markers that are plain in bulk. Now, if you are going to buy them in bulk, I'd recommend getting some that are a couple of different colors because it is helpful to be able to differentiate between different stitch markers as you're using them. So either you can buy a couple of small packs in different colors, or you can buy big bulk sets. And I will link to a couple of those down below on Amazon. Now, if you want to go a little fancier, two of the sets that I'd recommend are the Stitch Marker Flight from Coco Knits, or the Mindful Pack from Knit Pro. So these are both really pretty, and they have a variety of different shapes and sizes that make them easy to differentiate and are also useful for different kinds of needles. But unfortunately, they're only really for knitters because most of the markers in the sets are those closed type. Now, if you want to go a bit fancier and your friend likes things that are a bit less plain, then stitch markers are a really good thing to try buying because they come in really, really different designs. So stitch markers are basically like bling for your fiber crafts. And the reason that is because so far I've just shown you plain ones, but you can get stitch markers that have lots of pretty dangly things dangling off of them. And the variety in these is wild. The different kinds that you can get are just, it's hard to explain how many different kinds you can get. If these are the kinds of things that you want to get into, they're also a really good opportunity to support a small local business because a lot of knitting accessory companies make these by hand, and a lot of them are just sort of little artisan handcraft stores. In Australia, I would definitely recommend looking up 11D1 Windmills. Most of my stitch markers come from her because I love the design and the quality. She has a bunch that are very like pop culture referencey, but she also has some that are a bit more neutral and some that are just like pretty abstract designs. Go take a look at her site. That's a good starting place. And otherwise, if you're overseas or if you just want to find something a bit more local to you, it's very easy to find them on Google. Or if you go into Etsy and filter down to your location or things that ship from your country, then you can find some local makers who would, I'm sure, appreciate your business. So the next category of things that I suggest you look up are project bags. So these are specialty bags that you put your knitting or your crochet in, and they just hold one project at a time. So these also come in a variety of different price points, but they do skew a little bit more expensive than stitch markers. So there are lots of different types and aspects to project bags. The things that I would look for. First off, avoid zippers. This is more of a personal preference for me, but I do think that it's a handy sort of guide if you don't know what else to look for. So drawstring bags are a lot more useful in my opinion, and these are a really good thing to get from a local yarn store because a lot of yarn stores carry branded project bags. So that's a fun thing to get someone if you're looking for something a little bit on the cheaper side. Now, this project bag is the one that I've made for myself, but I'm showing it to you because it has a couple of features that I personally like. I like having handles. That's helpful if you want to use the bag as a bag by itself and you don't want to put it in another bag. And then also it has this bucket sort of drawstringy closure. So if you're looking for bags like these, in Australia, the two places that I'd recommend looking for are Crystal Cat Stitchery and Patil Knits. So Crystal Cat make a lot of different sized bags and they have handles and drawstrings and all different types of features. And Patil Knits also make drawstring bags, but they are quilted and so they're like fluffy and sort of nice to just squish. And in terms of sizing, if you know what sorts of things that your friend makes, then if they make socks or beanies or mittens mostly, then you can get away with getting them a small sized one. If they make shawls, then you can get the medium-sized ones. And if they make garments like jumpers or dresses, then I'd suggest buying them a big one. If they mostly make blankets, you should definitely just buy them a basket. So baskets you can look for anywhere really. They don't have to be knitting related. So I've been using this as my main blanket basket for a while, and it's from Gorman, which is just a commercial brand in Australia. And my sister bought it for me to put my pot plants in, and I decided to just use it as a knitting basket instead. So you can think out of the box in the basket category. Now, if you want to go really fancy, then the current trendy project bags are by a company named Redesigned, and they are definitely an investment. So it's a bigger purchase. They're made out of leather and they're really beautiful. And in Australia, the people I found who held the biggest range were Morris & Sons. So I'll put a link down to where you can find those bags below. Now, the next category of things are things that cut, which sound a bit silly, but let me explain. Most people who knit or crochet have a little pouch where they keep all their tools. And so being able to have a small pair of scissors in that pouch is always really helpful. So you can buy what's called embroidery scissors very easily, and you can buy them from most craft stores. I looked up a couple of options here, and there were these funny unicorn scissors that I found from Lincraft where the horn is the blade. And I also really like this option from Spotlight, which have a little flowery case. And these are a good thing to sort of bundle with some stitch markers if you want to have a bit of a bigger present. Now, the other thing that I'd recommend if your friend is someone who gets on planes a lot is a yarn cutter. So this is a little device that has a small concealed blade. So this is going to be hard to see, but there's actually a blade hiding in that little divot right there. And you can take them very easily on planes, and you can cut your yarn without having to worry about your scissors getting confiscated. So this is again from 11E1 Windmills, and she does sell this exact model at the moment, so I'll put a link to that down below, but she also has a couple of other designs that you can take a look at on her website. All right, the next set of things I have for you are yarn holders, which are different to project bags. Yarn holders are things that you just put your yarn into while you are knitting in your house. These are called yarn bowls. I personally have two. This one's from Knit Picks, and I will put a link to this down below. Mine's a bit of an older model. I looked on their website, and the one I'm going to link to also has these little holes on the side. This is my other yarn bowl, and as you can see, it has these little holes that you can feed your yarn through. If you are looking for yarn bowls, I would suggest making sure that they have both this swirly thing and the holes, or just have the swirly thing. Don't get something that just has holes, because the way knitting and crochet work, if you use the holes, your project gets stuck to that particular bowl until you finish the project, and I've never really thought that was a good idea. Bowls come in a variety of price points. They skew even higher than either the stitch markers or the bags, and you can go all the way from commercial, so like something from Knit Picks, up to specialty woodworking handcraft stores. So in the States, this is a good entry-level one. And in Australia, there's a shop called Yarn Trader, and they have a really good range of ceramic fun yarn bowls that have different prints and different sayings and things on them, so they're a good option for an entry-level bowl. If you're looking to go a little more artisan, I'd suggest looking up woodworking shops. So I did a quick search on Etsy for Australian ones, and one of the options I like the look of was something called Wood by Wombat. So they seem to make all sorts of wooden products like bowls and trays and things, but they also make these really pretty yarn bowls in a couple of different sizes. So I'll link to them down below as well. Now, another good option for things that you can use at home to hold your yarn are what are called yarn dispensers. So these are these funny little devices that have a top piece that spins on a base. You stick the yarn down onto this spindly bit, and as you knit or crochet, it spins the ball around and just sort of like makes it easy for the yarn to come off of the ball. So in Australia, I found a couple of different options that are a bit more entry level. So there's one by a brand named Millwood, and I found it on Yarn Me Calm, which is a yarn store. And that's a little bit on the smaller side, but it's a good entry level option. And then also Knit Pro make one that you can buy from a couple of different places. So I'll link to it down below from Morris & Sons. If you're looking for other options, or if you're not in Australia, the term you want to use is yarn dispenser. Now, the other option that you can buy, which I haven't personally got, is a travel one of these. So essentially it's a little device that does the same thing. You stick the yarn onto a spindle, but then the spindle hangs and it spins by itself sort of like freely in the air. And I know people use that when they're traveling to hook onto things like the seat in front of them on a train or a bus or a plane. Or also sometimes you can get some that have a wrist loop, and people actually use it to knit or crochet while they walk. So the Australian option I'm going to link to is from a store called The Wool Shop. But if you're looking for other options, then it's just called a traveling yarn holder, and you can put that into Google. And the last category of things that I have are items for washing your knitting. So washing knitting is a whole thing unto itself. A lot of the time you can't put it into the machine, so you need special stuff to do it. And also there's this thing called blocking that people do at the end of their knitting a lot of the time, which is where you wash it and then you pin it out to dry in a particular shape. Buying blocking accessories is really helpful, especially for someone who's a bit newer, because they probably won't already have any. And the two main things you can buy are boards and pins. So I'll insert some footage of me actually using my blocking boards, but essentially they're these big PVA interlocking mats, and you can just buy kids' play mats. That's actually what I started with, and they work really well, and you can buy those very cheaply off of Amazon. But if you're looking to invest a little bit, I would suggest buying some that have marking lines on them because it helps people to measure out their knitting without needing to do it with a tape measure. So the set that I wish that I had is this one from Amazon. It has both grid lines and circular lines, and I think the circles would be handy if you're doing a round or a curved project. In terms of pins, I don't have any of these, but I've heard really good things about the Knit Pro blockers, and they're these little plastic devices that have a set of pins hanging off of them so you can block your items more quickly. I'll put a link to them down below, but you can buy them from a couple of different stores. Just sort of look around and see if your local yarn store holds them. On the washing side of things, one of my favorite new acquisitions is called a Strucket. And Strucket sent me this for free, I will admit, but I'm recommending it because I do use it a lot and I really like it. So it's a big bucket that has a strainer on the inside and then also a tap that you can let the water out with. And it's just really handy because when you're making or washing really big items, then being able to just let the water out and pick the item up out of the water with the strainer is really handy because having that much water in a bucket can get really, really heavy. So I would recommend getting the 19-litre one because that's the size that I got and it's a really good size. Even if your friend makes smaller items, being able to wash lots of things at once is very helpful. Then the other product that I'd really recommend is something called Soak. So Soak is a specialty wool wash. There are a couple of other brands of these that you can get. There's something called Eucalan that also comes, highly recommended. But this is the one that I've always used. I like the scent called Celebration. And the reason that it's special is that you can put it in the washing water and then wash your knits. And then you don't actually have to rinse it out. So I'm going to link to it in Australia on a website called Yarnarama. And I picked that site specifically because they had the biggest range of scents that I could find. And they also have the biggest range of sizes that I could find. So Soak is sold all the way from tiny sample sachet sizes all the way up to this bottle, which is the biggest size that they sell. And there are a couple of different sizes in between. The thing I liked on Yarnarama is that they sold a pack of the little sachets in like a 4-pack of different scents. So that'd be a nice option if you want a more budget gift to give to someone. So the last thing in this category is something that I personally really want. This is the OXO Good Grips sweater drying rack. And what it is essentially is just a drying rack that's made out of netting that you can lay your knits out on flat. And the reason that I really want one of these is that I find when I'm trying to dry my knitwear out flat, the lack of airflow underneath the knitting makes it dry really slowly. And I also often have to flip my knitting so that it dries on both sides. So I really want one of these because I think it'll help things dry a lot more evenly and a lot faster. And it's a good size, so you can either put a jumper on it or you can put lots of little like socks and beanies and things on it. So I did promise I'd explain why I don't think you should buy some of the essential items. And so the reason that I think that you shouldn't buy yarn or needles or hooks or patterns is because there's a broad range of these things. And a lot of people who have been knitting or crocheting for a while are very specific and opinionated about what they want out of them. So if you'd be okay with me telling you a little story, my husband very kindly went present shopping for me like quite early on in our dating life. And he actually even went into a yarn store and asked for advice. And they gave him some yarn. It sat in my stash for about 12 years, and I have tried to use it here and there, and I've just never gotten around to using it because I can't figure out what to use it for. So people have really strong opinions about the essential items in their stashes, so that's why I wouldn't recommend buying any of these things. There are a couple of exceptions. So if your friend is a knitter and you know that they like knitting socks or shawls, it's very safe to buy them what's called sock yarn. So the things you want to look for on a label for sock yarn, it should say 4-ply if you're in Australia or UK, or fingering if you're in America. And it should say on it somewhere that it is merino and nylon. If you can find some yarn like that you like the colors of, then go ahead, and that should be a fairly safe purchase for someone who knits socks or shawls. If they make shawls, buy them 2 colors that match each other in exactly the same yarn. Again, this is a really good opportunity to support a small local business because there are a lot of specialty artisan yarn dyers in lots of different places, and so you'll probably be able to find one that's fairly local to you. If your friend is a crocheter and you know they make a lot of amigurumi or small toys, then buying them a multi-pack of one type of yarn in lots of small amounts of different colors is also a very nice gift, because those are really handy for making toys. It's also handy for people who knit toys. That's just a lot more rare than people who crochet them. So if you're looking for a good example of this, then We Crochet have a line called Animation Amigurumi Bundles. And they're pretty much exactly what I described. So that's a good option for anyone who makes a lot of toys. If you're really invested in buying someone patterns, then my main tip is to remember that whatever pattern you buy them, they will have to live with and like the finished object. So I think sometimes people sort of forget that, yes, knitting and crochet is a hobby in and of itself, but you also have to like the thing that you end up with. So if you're buying a pattern book for someone, try and take a look through the book and see if the pictures and the photography and the actual items sort of match up with what you know of what's in their house and in their wardrobe and things. If they are a more modern looking person, don't buy them a pattern book of lace doilies, because they probably won't like that. If you really want to find something that they actually want, then there's a website called Ravelry that a lot of knitters and crocheters use. That's a big database of patterns, and a lot of people will favorite or wish list items on there. So if you can find out what their Ravelry username is, you can go in and look at either their wish list or their queue. But if you do this, try and make sure you buy the pattern as a gift, which is an option that you can do on the website. Don't just buy the pattern and then email them the PDF, because just of the way that people use Ravelry, it's better if you buy them the pattern as a gift. For hooks, I will admit I don't know much about crochet hooks, but if you are someone who crochets and there is just like a standard crochet hook set that's a really good solid gift set, then please put a link to it down below. And for needles, one of the best presents I ever got was my first set of interchangeable needles. So if you have a friend who is new-ish to knitting, if they have gotten pretty into it and it looks like they're going to be doing it for a while, but they haven't gotten so into it that they have a whole kit, then a really nice gift is an entry-level interchangeable needle set. So the two actual options that I recommend are either from Knit Pro in Australia, and they make an interchangeable set called Zing, and then in the States there's a set from Knit Picks called the Prism Aluminium Options set, or just their options range in general. So those are all the suggestions that I'm going to cover today. I know there's lots and lots of things that I missed out, and I mostly know that because I had a much longer list and I just had to cut it down because there were too many things to go over. But if there's anything that you really think that I should have included, please leave it down in the comments below. I hope that you found something in there that was helpful for your gift buying for your friends, and I hope that you yourself have a really nice and lovely and enjoyable holiday season. Now again, if you have any other opinions, if you're a knitter or a crocheter yourself, please leave them down below in the comments. But if you found this helpful at all, I'd also really appreciate a like on the video. And if you want to see what I make in the future, then you can hit the subscribe button right here. Or if you want to watch any of my previous videos, then a lot of them are about my own knitting, and I'll link to a playlist of those right here. But until next time, I've been Katrina Walser from Oliphant Cat. Happy knitting!